to episode 10 of Talent Hub TV. We're here with Martin Gessner today, and we're going to be talking about his career in Salesforce and focus on Force, a business that he set up to help more people through the Salesforce certification process and get their first step into the Salesforce world. So welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming along.
No problem.
So Martin, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about your career and now the new business that you've set up recently. So to go back to the beginning, let's talk a bit about your career before Salesforce and what you did, and then how you transitioned that into the Salesforce world.
Sure. So I've been involved in IT for probably over 20 years, and quite early on I got involved in CRM projects. Quite a few years ago, we're talking Siebel CRM,
okay,
and SAP CRM.
Yeah.
SAP, they had something called mobile sales.
Sure.
So I was involved in quite a few projects over the years, both in Australia and internationally, contracting in different roles. Basically rolling out those types of projects that help to support sales teams and service. And then I was working for a company that had a different CRM and started rolling out Salesforce globally. So then we started to look at rolling it out in Australia as well.
And when was that?
That was back in 2010. I think was the first time that I started to work with Salesforce. So,
okay. Yeah. So one of the people kind of fell into the Salesforce world through a company doing implementation. Yes,
exactly. And it was that particular example is where the company decided to roll it out globally, and then it kind of trickled down from the global level to the regional level down to Australia.
Sure. Okay. So obviously you've been in the market for quite a while. What roles have you performed specific to the Salesforce industry since taking that first step into the market?
So the first role I had was as a project manager. So we were rolling out, as I said, sort of a local implementation of a global template. And then moving on from there, I had some contract roles as a consultant. So some large organisations here in Australia implementing Salesforce. I worked for a Salesforce consulting company for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And when you work for a consulting company, you basically have, depending on the project, you have a number of different roles. It could be more like a business analyst, could be a technical consultant, could be a functional consultant, and solution design. So yeah, really, you really need to be flexible when you're working for consulting companies, depending on the needs of the project.
Sure.
But I've pretty much stayed more on the functional side than the technical side.
Never dabbled in any code?
A little bit, as needed, but there's always been a team of people to support.
Sure.
And I haven't really gone too deeply into the development side.
Sure. Okay, so over the years, what have you enjoyed about working on Salesforce projects?
I think the main thing is that you can basically spin up an org very quickly, and you can get a handle on requirements, and you can actually demonstrate a prototype or demonstrate some functionality very quickly.
Sure.
You can start from scratch. You can configure. You can use App Exchange apps, and in a matter of days, you can basically go back and show the business something that gives them an idea of how Salesforce could support their processes or solve a problem.
Which must have been quite a shock coming from SAP or Siebel into Salesforce, because I imagine it's very different in those bulkier systems.
Yeah, exactly. So in those days, we're talking about on-premise systems, and then you had all the challenges of configuring something on-premise. The time to actually get something done was a lot more, whereas these days it's just very quick.
Sure. So the Salesforce market has evolved so much, and we're seeing so many people coming into the market now, and it's such a hot market that a lot of people see it for what it is now, but not necessarily what it once was. So you've been in the market a long time. How has the Salesforce platform evolved in that time? What's changed?
I think it's just continued to grow over the years in terms of the breadth of functionality that it covers. So when I first started working with it, it was mainly sales functionality, it was mainly Sales Cloud, and starting to get into Service Cloud. and over the years, through all the acquisitions, Salesforce has basically expanded that functionality, and now they have a world-class Service Cloud offering.
Yeah.
It was pretty basic right at the beginning. So, obviously they continue to invest in Sales Cloud. They've got Service Cloud, they've brought on Marketing Cloud, and all the other sort of niche parts of the Salesforce world with CPQ. Field Service Lightning now is a very fast-growing part of the business. So it really has expanded into a lot of niche areas, and one of the recent acquisitions with MuleSoft now positions Salesforce as a company that really can help with systems that are in the cloud, but also for larger organisations that have a lot of on-premise systems still. So
sure.
they're right in that ballgame now of being the provider of integration services as well as on cloud and SaaS solutions.
Sure. And did you see that growth way back when you first started? Did you predict that it would be the solution that it is today?
No, I don't think anyone could have predicted how quickly and how fast and how wide the growth was.
Yeah.
It's just been amazing to watch.
And it shows no signs of slowing down.
No, not at all.
So now you're not working in consulting, or you're not necessarily performing a delivery role right now. You set up a while ago, but you're now full time with Focus on Force.
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about that business?
Yeah. So that business. So basically, we help people prepare for Salesforce certifications. We're offering study guides and practice exams. Right now, we cover 8 certifications. And it's really something that grew out of a need that I saw when I was first studying for certifications all those years ago, 8 years ago when I did admin certification. And so I thought it would be useful to have something that would help me study. So I basically put down my notes as I went through the different topics that you need to know.
Sure.
And then I thought, well, as having those notes and having a summary of the knowledge, it would also be good to be able to test myself. So that's where the idea came from, basically, to be able to package something together that would help provide summary of what you need to know, and also an opportunity to be able to test yourself.
Sure.
And not just test yourself, but be able to learn from the questions. So we've been very careful around creating questions that are really helpful to help people learn the whys behind the questions. And so it's not just a right and wrong answer.
Yeah, sure.
It gives you an explanation, and a lot of the time it gives you a screenshot. So it helps you think about, why is this question correct or not correct? And we also encourage people to go in and recreate those scenarios in their own orgs.
Sure.
To really get some learning experience out of testing themselves.
So initially it was a tool for yourself, and then I guess did you use it to help some people around you and people that you work with, and then the business formed from there?
Yeah, pretty much. It started when I was working for a consulting company. I started a blog, and I blogged about the learnings that I had on projects. And then as I started to do the certifications as well, I put those notes together. I started to think about questions, and I put some sample questions on the site. Started to become popular, so I packaged that up, and that was something that became popular. People started to ask for the next one and the next one.
Flowed from there.
Yeah.
So what's the underlying goal? What's the vision for Focus on Force?
So right now we're concentrating mainly on certifications, but the overall goal is really just to help people learn the platform. Trailhead is fantastic as a self-study tool, but what we're trying to do is just give an additional sort of learning opportunity for people. So there's, like I said, there's 2 sort of paths to it. One is to package up that knowledge and to help people sort of understand what's expected in the different parts of the certification. And then on the other hand, the learning part. So even though right now we're focused on certifications, we're also looking at expanding beyond that to more general Salesforce training. Right now the options, if you want to do Salesforce training, you can go into a classroom at Salesforce, and that's quite expensive.
Yeah.
That's not an option for everyone. And you can do the self-study on Trailhead, which is great as well, but it misses the interactive part.
Sure.
So what we've got at the moment with our offering is we have forums. So if people have questions just generally about the certification process or questions about the questions, something they don't understand, then we actually reply to them in the forums to help people learn. But we also see an opportunity to expand it beyond certifications to general Salesforce training. Could be admin, could be other aspects of Salesforce that are becoming popular, like flows and process builder.
Sure.
And, I think there's a lot of opportunity just to help people and to provide more of an interactive, environment to answer people's questions and go beyond the Trailhead, which is great, but it doesn't obviously give you any opportunity to clarify things or ask questions.
Yeah, for sure. So has training always been a passion of yours?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in training and explaining things. One of the things we're concentrating on at the moment is improving our materials to make them a little bit more visually appealing. So that if you need to learn about a topic or a refresh of a topic, that we've got a lot of overview diagrams already, but we're looking to add to that and to just make it more visually sort of attractive, and so that you can look at something, have a snapshot, and get an idea of what that is about. I think the challenge with Salesforce is that it's just become so wide. There's just so much functionality, and in a lot of companies you might not be using all of that functionality. So it's a bit of a challenge to do a certification like on Service Cloud if your company mainly uses Sales Cloud.
For sure.
So so that's where we try to either help people learn those concepts or refresh those concepts if they haven't used them for a while.
Sure. Okay. And I find it amazing looking on LinkedIn. I'm regularly seeing people tagging you all over the world, thanking you for the courses and so on. So how many people do you think now that you've helped on their certification path today?
So I think over the years, as I said, it's we started about 4 or 5 years ago. So over the years, it's in the tens of thousands of people now.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so it is popular, and it has been well received, and when people do the first one, then they find it valuable, they find it helpful, so then they'll come back and they will use it for the next one as well. Yeah,
and the feedback we've had, we always direct people to the platform if they're going on that certification journey, and the feedback we get is that it's really helpful, and I've used it myself, and it's the most similar I've found to the actual certification questions from all of the options online. So yeah, for me it's a great platform. So for people looking to move into the Salesforce world now, what do you think is the biggest challenge for a newbie in the market?
I think some of the challenges are that obviously Salesforce has 3 releases a year, so it's quite hard to keep up with basically what's the latest functionality. And as we said before, it's just the functionality is so wide now. So picking a starting point is also quite hard as well. And it's a bit of chicken and egg. Obviously, you need sort of experience to get a role, and without that experience, you find it hard to actually get an opportunity. So a lot of people do all the trailheads. They might get certified. But it's kind of getting that first sort of foot in the door.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of people they look for volunteering opportunities, and I think they're great. The other thing that I suggest to people is just to build some things out yourself that you could demo.
Yeah. So just in a developer org.
Yeah, just get a developer org, and if you are going for a role, have that up your sleeve to say, well, I've got certifications, I've got knowledge, I've got trailheads, but I've also here's something that I've configured myself to demonstrate my capabilities.
Yeah, it really makes sense. Yeah, and that's something that it's proof, right? I've done this. This is what I've built, and this is the outcome. And and then people can't say you can't do it because you're showing them you have.
Right, and I think it's quite it's an amazing sort of environment that Salesforce gives to people. They give free training through Trailhead, and they give the free developer orgs. So really, it's up to your own abilities and your own discipline to basically do that, to go through that learning, and there's nothing stopping you to get to the point where you can build up that knowledge and skill yourself and demonstrate to somebody, say, look, I've built this myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's quite unique in the IT world. A lot of other vendors, they're not going to give you that free training. They're not going to give you that access to nearly all the platform features for free, and go away and say, hey, make what you can out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there really is no excuse if you want a career in Salesforce. There's all of the tools there to help you on that journey. And like you said, it's unique. I know of no other platform that gives you that. So yeah, it's amazing. And how do you see, you've seen a lot of, I guess, growth and evolution of the platform. How do you see it evolving from here?
I think, so obviously, I was quite amazed when I went to Dreamforce. They asked the Einstein team to stand up, and I was just amazed at the size of that team.
Yeah.
And so, Salesforce, they see AI and that side of thing as a huge part of their future and a way to differentiate themselves from other vendors.
Course.
So building in Einstein and building in AI and all of that into all of the products to make them more intelligent and to give you predictions and basically to act as your assistant and to mine the data and actually get some insights out of that data. I think that's a huge sort of direction and a huge part of where Salesforce is putting its investment into.
Yeah, for sure.
So obviously there's the Wave and there's the analytics component of Salesforce that is standalone, but it's starting to get integrated more into the standard product.
Mm-hmm.
And then building Einstein in as well. And some of the features like Prediction Builder, where it can actually go and look at your data and make predictions out of what you've got there. So I think that's one huge direction that I can see the platform going, and don't see that slowing down.
Exciting times.
Yeah, and I think also voice and getting away from having to interact with the system in a traditional way with a keyboard, having a voice assistant, being able to interact with Salesforce in other ways. It's quite exciting as well. So that you'll be able to just talk to Salesforce and ask them, what is the sales forecast? What's the prediction for the sales forecast? Or ask different questions where you'll actually get some sort of intelligent insight. Yeah,
for sure. It's crazy. So we spoke a little bit about Trailhead. It's an amazing platform, but what impact do you think that has had on certifications?
I think Trailhead has had an impact on the certifications in that they have actually started creating trail mixes that are specific for the certifications. So it really helps people. Previously, the trailheads were great. You could run through them all. There was an admin, there were admin trailheads, and you could do all of those in preparation for an admin certification. But I think Salesforce now are becoming a little bit more focused, giving people a little bit more direction. And so there could be a Service Cloud trail mix just for the Service Cloud certification. So it basically gives you a path to follow, and instead of having that whole huge list of trailheads, you know more what you should be going through. And then, as we've said, trailheads is great because it kind of gives you the exercises, gives you the knowledge, gives you the topics that are going to be part of that certification, and you can work through that. And I always say to people that you shouldn't just rely on one method. Mm-hmm. And our materials are great for revision, for learning, having a concise summary, for doing interactive sort of questions. But you should combine that with Trailhead, and you should combine that with your own work and your own devil to actually get practical experience and recreate the scenarios. And you've got some of that in the Trailheads, but you should also do more yourself. And then ideally you're combining that with your own work experience as well.
Sure.
So it's quite hard for some of the certifications to do them if you haven't had practical experience.
Yeah, for sure.
admin, probably you could probably get by. But once you start to get into other ones like Service Cloud, it's very difficult if you haven't worked on those sort of environments in actual projects.
Yeah.
It's possible, but you just got to do more work. And the overall goal, I think, of Salesforce and certifying people is to actually, to be able to recognise people that have got the knowledge, but also the skill in that area, and the skill comes from getting the experience, hopefully in an actual project environment.
Yeah, because I think we see a lot of people that get the cert and then think, great, I'm now a Salesforce professional, but there's a lot more to it than that, and I think that's what people need to be aware of when they're entering the space. The cert is very helpful, and definitely studying towards it and going through your material and exercise really helps, but you also need some sort of practical experience to really validate that you do know what you're doing.
Right.
What's the best piece of advice you would give to someone now looking to start their Salesforce career?
I think it would be that you should think about where you want to go and what your career path is. So when I started all those years ago, it was quite easy just to be a Salesforce consultant, and to be across all of the functionality and to be across how to configure Salesforce. And there was very limited development options available. But now it's just expanded so far that I think the starting point is to decide, do you want to follow a functional career path or a development career path? It's pretty hard to really be a master of both of those. They're different skills. So deciding what your strengths are, what your interests are. Would you prefer to do business analysis and workshops and defining requirements and doing more of the configuration side and not so much of the development? Or do you prefer to actually get hands-on with coding and follow a technical career path where you're going to be becoming an expert in Apex and Visual Force and Lightning and JavaScript now with the new sort of developments with Lightning, Lightning components. So do you want to follow more of that path and go from being a developer and maybe senior developer and then team leader and going forward to that? There's also the question about, do you want to stay more as an end user or do you want to go into a consulting role? And they're very different as well, obviously, and need different skills. And then finally, I would say that I think it would be an advantage these days to become an expert in one particular area. Because as we've said, it's just so wide. If you can demonstrate that you're an expert in CPQ, for example, that would go a long way. If you're an expert in field service Lightning, if you're the Lightning component guru, if you can demonstrate that you're really you've specialised or you're really up to date and you know everything that's going on in one particular area, that would make you stand out as well, and that would be really useful, I think, going forward.
Yeah, I think there's enough opportunity in the market to now be a specialist in a vertical rather than being a broad Salesforce specialist, and I think that's something we'll see more of as the market continues to grow. So yeah, I completely agree with that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think the platform is doing a great thing for people on their journey, and we hear really good things about it, and we will continue to recommend it to our audience that are going through that certification path. So we'll add your details on the video, and people can find you from there.
All right,
and thanks very much.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.